Hello everybody, John Blunt here again from Seattle's IsGood Woodworks with another one of our certification videos. This time it is for the standard table saw. A table saw is basically the same thing as a handheld circular saw, embedded with the motor and the blade embedded in a large table. Gives you much better control. I'm going to name the parts for you now. This is the guard. We're going to show the video with the guard out of the way. Don't use it that way. This is so you can see what we're describing at the blade. I'm going to swing it out now. Pretend it's there. Okay, that's the guard. This is the fence. It's also generally referred to as the rip fence. Ripping is cutting the long way on a piece of material, and it is used to guide cuts of that type. This is the miter gauge. It's generally used for cross-cutting, which is cutting a piece of wood with the grain running, or not the grain necessarily, the long direction running this way. I'm going to have to explain why you choose this some of the time, and you choose this other times as part of safety protocols for this saw. The rest of the controls are here. Green switch to make the motor go, red switch to make it stop. Pretty simple. And around the corner, right here, is the control that can tip the blade. You can't use this tight fence in tipping the blade because it will bind, and there's a wider opening. Call it a fence. That is the blade insert. And this will tip the blade that direction on this saw to do bevel cuts, miter cuts or bevel cuts. With the fence it can do what's called a bevel miter cut, which is the long way angle cut along the length of a board. More on that later. I'm putting it back up now because I do not like to leave it this way. And this wheel right here is the one that raises and lowers the blade. And it's pretty simple. Those are the basic parts of a standard table saw. Next, I will show you the safety protocols for this machine. Every table saw comes with one of these, miter gauge, basic guide, and the rip fence, the other basic guide. They're 90 degrees to each other if this is set at 90. More about that later. It can make angles. We're not concerned with that right now. This piece of wood has an aspect ratio, or a difference. One side is long and one side is shorter, unless it's square, in which case everything I'm saying is moot. You want to be able to control the travel of this piece while you're cutting so that it doesn't do anything like this. No wobble. No wobble this way is a good thing, very easy because you got a big flat table. And otherwise you're going to record the cut that isn't straight because it didn't move straight. You're also going to risk having the blade take control and throw it. So looking at your piece of wood, look at the long side. You want to choose, according to the cut you're making, whichever one of these gives you the longest interface, the longest overlap of the long side of the wood. That would be this one to make this cut. You just grip it against the miter gauge and run it through, and it'll cut it off right here. Fine. So that's a given. That's 99% of it for that particular kind of cut. If you decide to guide it by this, you're guiding it by the narrow part, which doesn't have as much stability or control. 2, you're running it against the blade, which is pushing on it this way, off center a lot. So the blade is going to want to make it to start turning. The only way to avoid that is hold it close here and put hard pressure against this fence. That's not going to work well. Now, if it does start to turn, it will immediately put pressure on the blade. The diagonal is longer than this distance, which is what you're set for, and it is trapped between the blade and the rib fence. So that's why it'll make pressure and it can't escape. The blade will immediately put friction at 180 miles an hour with 5 horsepower is behind it on this surface, and that will make it move further, and it's a hockey stick curve that just shoots right up and it throws it right through like that. Did you see the blade bend? Maybe you didn't, but I could see it bend a long way. That's a pretty sturdy piece of metal. So you don't do this. And if you do this, that's where your hands have to be. Because if you leave that loose in there and did something where you were cutting this piece off that way, with a longer piece being held here, then you got a trapped piece that will move by itself and start vibrating and throw it at you. You can't do both at once because that is way too distracting, and you end up holding this piece in there and controlling it here anyway. No. Long side here, cut here. Don't do this at all. Now, there's another direction. What do you do if you want to cut it lengthwise? Well, we'll take this out of the way. And usually it's not there while you are ripping. And loosen the fence. Move it over for you to cut this a little bit off. You tighten it by pressing down on the arm till it's all the way down. And you push it through. You don't push that through with your hand. You will have the guard in place. Still don't push it through with your hand if you can help it. You use a push stick like this for safety's sake and run it through like that. And that will give you that safe method of making the long cut because of the amount of interface you've achieved by choosing this. So take a handy hint from Mr. Natural. Get the right tool for the job. Now, a couple other little details. One is, this is called a splitter. We're not going to run the machine right now. I'm just going to reset this and pretend to cut it. And when I run this through, that splitter helps control it. One of the things that can happen with the table saw is the piece of material wants to swing that way. It wants to swing that way even more from the pressure of the blade pushing in here. So an effort has to be made to hold it in. It's not actually a good idea to cut such a short piece because you have a period of time here where your splitter is not helping hold it in. It will help hold it in. Only a little bit of play right there. If you can be holding it back here, because it's longer, until it hits the splitter, and then finish cutting, you've got the ability to hold this whole board in from here while pushing here, while the rest of the board would be here. And once the splitter is in, it's at the splitter, you can start pushing it this way and not worry about having to torque that end against the fence. So those are all important considerations. This is a safety device that you need. Just 1 second. I will show you what can happen if it's missing. It has been missing and it has created accidents in my shop of all places. I'll be right back. I had to get the wrench. The wrench will remove this, which only under certain circumstances is that allowed. And it's a fork interface, meaning that you can pull this off straight upward. Takes a bit of turning, And you lift it up, and then you tighten this down in place. Don't take it off the saw, and they inevitably get lost. Leave it there, don't leave it loose. You don't want a piece of metal falling off next to that blade. So you tighten it down. I'll explain in a second under what circumstances you can work with it off, but mainly what I'm doing right now is showing what can happen to you at this point. And you're pushing, and there's nothing to keep that from opening up anymore. This will torque on the blade right there, right there. It will put pressure on the blade right there, and guess which direction it shoots it? Like that. Pinches it and shoots it like a spear at you. If that happens, and you are right at this point pushing it, guess where your hand is while it travels there? Don't do it. You should not be doing this anyway without this on it instead of your hand. But you can compound the risk enormously by leaving this off. And if you leave it off when you're done, you're endangering somebody else, a member of our community, and that is not allowed. That's one of the things about IsGood is we got a great culture here, and people do appreciate each other, and they do protect each other. So, there are occasions when you will be making a cut where this piece is a splitter will actually prevent you from making a cut. It's a cut that's not made all the way through the wood, in which case it is acceptable. In fact, it's necessary to remove the splitter temporarily while you make a groove, for example, in the bottom of a piece of wood. So I'm going to set up and do one of those operations with a splitter in place. And I'm going to set it up to make a very shallow groove right there. Let's say that's our setup. I want to put that groove pretty close to right down the middle. I'm going to run the saw now. This is a grip right here. Push in, hold down. Use this. Make your cut. Oops. I hit the splitter. Dang. Now I have to turn the saw off and wait for it to stop. Proper response when you have a surprise. Just hold it and let the saw stop. We're going to take that back out, and we would, for that, have needed to take the splitter off for that operation immediately after you're done having to have it off. That's when you're supposed to put it back on for the next person. So that's another safety thing that we don't let you break. Hey, we love you, but you got to follow some rules so you don't hurt other people or yourself. And so I'm going to put it back up to a normal. Hey, there's one other pinching condition that everybody has to know all about, and that is if you're tipping the blade, you can get shot with a spear that can accelerate to that 180 miles an hour I'm talking about really quickly. I'm not trying to scare you. You all drive cars. Cars are dangerous as hell, but you know how to deal with them. So I'm trying to educate you so that you won't do the things that make your car dangerous. We showed you earlier how we can tip the blade with that wheel there to produce a bevel miter cut. That's what this cut is right here. Being done very wrong, very dangerously. As I pass the wood through, I'm going underneath the blade that's leaning this way with the fence, trapping it from slipping away from the blade. This opening at the top is smaller than it is down below. So if it starts to lift up at the end of the cut, this is what happens. It pulls that thing upward, tightening this even further because it's going into a small opening. The blade will go whang, way over. It'll accelerate this piece in no time at all to potentially 180 miles an hour. So you don't do this unless you want to get shot. There is a way to do it that's safely, and it's really very simple, and we'll restage and I'll show you that. If you move the fence to the opposite side to make your cut, then you're doing it safely. Because if the piece starts to lift up in anywhere along this pathway, it's coming up into an open area, and it's not trapped where it's going to pinch it if it does lift. So this is a safe way to make the cut, assuming, of course, the guard would be in place, but we're not using it for demonstration's sake. So in our shop, there's not a particularly good reason to do this awkward cut, which is working on the opposite side of the blade from normal. This is the blade that tips toward the normal operations tips this direction. We have two saws, and they're set up and tweaked for different purposes. This one is for detail cuts. This is the jet saw. It's the one we use for detail cuts and fancy work. And then we have the Powermatic saw in the back, which is set up for rips. That's what it shines at, because of the way we tweaked it. So we're going to take you back there and show you how quick and easy it is to do your rips back there, and you can do it very safely in multiple respects, because the guard is a different type, and it tips away from the blade when the fence is in the normal position. It goes this way. So we're just going to give you a quick shot of that. As you can see on the Powermatic saw, the blade is tipped the opposite direction, which means that you can put the fence in their custom position, one that people are used to and that they generally have better control on. So to the blade to the right, you can do this safely, because it's going to lift out, just like the last shot. So not only that, you've got the advantage of the full guard. You can drop it on there once you get it started, and you can fit this in there if you leave this part of the guard up and push it all the way through beyond the blade. Okay, now for the demo. I'm going to do a rip this way and a cross cut this way. Got my width set. Got my push stick ready. And I'm putting the guard in place just to show you that it actually is there. Long side? Long side. And now the cross cut. Long side. Right there. Long side. Cross cut. So one of the reasons that we call this in a detail saw is because of what's all around it, including territory, feed links, and all the jigs that go with it that we don't have at the back saw, which is a ripping workhorse and occasionally detail work. And this is a convenient saw for that, and one that I prefer for people to use. I'm going to put this, put the table saw sled on there. It's a tool that can be used to attach lots of other tools. It is used to do such things as put a notch on the edge Guards got to come up. Guards got to go, in fact. So that's one quick operation. Didn't do it very well. And we have what's called a dado set that goes with this. That's a saw blade device. It has two saw blades and chippers in between, and you can build them up and do that notch all in one cut without this kind of careless scrap sitting right there and repeating the width every time once you've assembled it. And so there's that. There's a lot of other things. We have a jig that clamps on here for doing finger lap joints and a few other things. So this is the detail saw area. This is the jet saw. Powermatic saw is the one we prefer to leave available for people for rips. So if you set it up, only if you have to. If somebody's on here already tying it up for something you want to do. We do have some of these setups back there at the Powermatic saw. That concludes the certification video for standard table saws. Thank you for watching. We'd love to see you here so that we can actually watch you run the table saws. So please do come in and enjoy our community and join us. Thank you very much.